Chapter 113. I grin smugly at the slack-jawed Vrothizo sitting on my operating table, rapidly flexing my internal spellcasting muscles to sterilize her severed finger before it finishes dropping into my stomach. While I certainly admit to some personal satisfaction at eliciting this response from young Clark, there is some practical purpose to my sudden carnivorous display. In my experience, nothing helps a lesson stick inside one's mind more than a little bit of drama. The same is true even for a girl with perfect memories, I suspect. Remembering a lesson is not the same as keeping it in the forefront of one's thoughts. Still, in the short term, I am already regretting this. I am First Lady Penelope Vesuvius the Inhuman, and I must regretfully admit that uncooked Vrothizo flesh is the single most disgusting thing I have ever eaten. Including my penchant for auto-cannibalism, which at least has the excuse of being inherently efficient and guaranteed sterile. Watcher's eyes, though, it has nothing on this inconceivably repulsive flavor. I feel like I have just consumed rotting sulfur and fish sausage marinated in diarrhea. I'm going to need to wash the inside of my mouth for weeks, and I'm seriously considering using conimancy to remove the damn memory. Unfortunately, that will leave evidence on my soul that I can ill afford. Anyway, I make a mental note to add the wretched flavor of Vrothizo flesh to my physical notes, because science is equal parts rigor and suffering, and I see no point in omitting valuable data from the records, no matter how arbitrary it may seem. That's all I need from you, by the way, I tell Clark, who manages to pick her jaw of glorious teeth up off the floor. For today, I mean. I have a council meeting later and I would like to get these samples situated before then. The Vrothizo stutters. Does that mean you, are going to eat them, ma'am? I allow myself a chuckle. No, I tell her honestly. You taste horrid. I enjoy watching her expression twist between relief at the idea that I won't continue, horror at the implication that I would have eaten them had she not tasted so unpalatable, and most entertainingly, a confused sort of offense at the idea that she does. I must say, out of all of Vida's strays, this one is by far my favorite. She is both fantastically useful and endlessly fun to tease. Not to mention, well, as I watch her swing her legs off my operating table and stand up to retrieve her armor, I find myself enraptured by the unparalleled poetry that is her body. The tight tapestry of muscles underneath her skin, the beautiful interwoven web of additions to her human frame, each adapted and modified from the base creature with such unparalleled genius I cannot help but feel a churning, invigorating inadequacy. She stretches and smooths her talons against the floor, controlled enough to not damage the wood as her almost impossibly powerful legs carry her across the room. Her quills thrum a brief, discordant tune as she leans down, sucking energy out of the world with nothing but a thoughtless movement. One of her forearms scratches her back as the other three efficiently coordinate the reassembly of her plate armor, the motion practiced and perfected yet coming from a girl with barely any experience at the act. In both mind and body, Lark is gifted beyond measure, and I must force myself to suppress a shudder of pleasure at the thought of unlocking that power for myself. Lark, I call to her as she leaves. I mean it. You don't need the mask. She pauses, her armor once again obstinately hiding her beauty. She nods politely in my direction. Thank you, ma'am, she says without enthusiasm, and departs the room. A bittersweet exit, but not an unexpected one. If only she could get over her incessant self-destructive winging, she would be perfect. As is, she's far too vulnerable to emotional manipulation and far too devoted to my enemies. I can't believe I had to resort to spouting religious drivel to drill my point through her skull. I look forward to helping her develop the confidence to make her own moral judgments before opening the closet door in which the church has carelessly stuffed every last crime they've committed and letting it all collapse on her head. Then she'll be free, and that will be as good as being mine. I push away the last of that whimsical anticipation. I have things to do, and enjoying victory is an activity only worthwhile after actually achieving victory. In many ways this was my pleasure for the day. Now I must immerse myself in work. I take the samples to preservation, letting myself thoughtlessly cast the necessary spells on them as I puzzle through the oddities of Lark's biology. Obviously, a significant amount of natural biomancy occurs within her body when she regenerates and presumably also when she develops new traits, but I can't bloody find where the spell gets formed. I know she uses normal mana, a constant stream of it flows into her soul, passing through her quills and teeth in order to power their enchantments, but rather than being formed into spells within said soul the mana just vanishes. Perhaps this is related to her spatial magic part digestive system, but I've yet to divine how. Frustrating, yet engaging. My favorite kind of problem. Unfortunately, I have countless other problems that I need to solve as well. I can't believe that there was once a point in my life in which I looked forward to the roles and responsibilities of a First Lady. To be clear, I certainly appreciate the power and the prestige, but if I could get out of all these damn government meetings and focus more on my work I would be quite grateful. Alas, Vigor would likely collapse into a sniveling heap without my assistance, and I do happen to live here and thereby possess significant incentive to prevent that. I store Lark's severed digits with the rest of my collected Vrothizo parts and exit my laboratory complex, taking in the sights and sounds of my beloved city. Templar Jelisavet's absolutely magnificent sensorium is almost too powerful to make use of, but I'm quite glad I successfully identified how it functions. Implementing it into my own body has been a slow process, and one that I am purposely performing with imperfection, as I fear simply co-opting every improvement simultaneously would be dangerously overwhelming. Instead, I've been improving each of my senses little by little, and while this process is nowhere near complete, even the early stages highlight the beauty of the world in ways I would have never previously been capable of experiencing. I amuse myself by meeting the odd stares of the populace, my hands clasped primly behind my back as I walk down busy streets on my way to the Capitol building. I possess neither escorts nor guards, confident in both the lack of interest my city has in harming me and my capacity to destroy anyone that tries regardless. The structure we nobles meet the king in has regained some of its ostentatious pointlessness since that moment 2 years prior where I kneeled before Templars barely disguising their attempt to cleanly and legally murder me under the pretense of war. The previously wooden building has now been replaced with proper stone construction, grand and artistic in ways I'll never understand the human obsession with. Insultingly, there are multiple small tentacle motifs throughout the outside of the building, as if this place was a goddamn chapel rather than a government structure. They aren't even being subtle about it, and somehow that's the part that rankles me the most. Well, hello there, Vesuvius, Guldra drawls in that aggravatingly lackadaisical tone of hers. The wretched woman is a High Templar first and foremost, which often makes people forget the fact that she is also a true lady and therefore, as if by some cosmic joke, fully capable of influencing government policy. She falls into step beside me as I enter the Capitol building, insisting on annoying me with her proximity. Hello there, First and True Lady High Templar Guldra Carthela the Annihilator, I schmooze back at her, watching her lips crinkle upward with amusement at my use of her entire list of titles. If Guldra has a single redeeming quality, it is the fact that she is easy to manipulate. Unfortunately, I gain relatively little from manipulating her, because she is a woman trained to do very little other than kill and follow orders, and I'm not the one giving her those orders. Nonetheless, I have seen the difference between how Guldra treats people she finds amusing compared to people she finds detestable, and I am firmly incentivized to remain in the former category. Are you as excited to spend 3 hours discussing sewage maintenance budgets as I am? She asks, removing her helmet in an uncharacteristic display of basic social graces. I suspect her only motivation for doing so is that she was feeling stuffy. Indeed, I will be precisely as riveted to the discussion as you, I answer, admitting quite honestly that I intend to tune out the entire meeting. I'm surprised that you've yet to flee outside the walls of the city, Lady Carthela. Days like this make me wish I was still a hunter. It's imperative that I attend these meetings so that I don't miss anything important. This is, after all, where all of the highest level government decisions get passed down from, but surprising no one, it turns out that the majority of governance is quite boring and entirely irrelevant to my objectives. My position in these discussions boils down to joining the side that wins me the most political sway, which is usually decided long before any arguments are brought to the table. My presence is almost entirely performative, and paying attention would be useless drudge work, which is why I prefer to spend the time further transforming myself into a crime against nature. Nature, after all, is terrible, and therefore every crime against it is a victory for all of us. I wish I could be out burning things, Goldra grumbles. Unfortunately, I'm being kept home in case I need to burn our little baby blackbird. Honestly, Vesuvius, if you could fudge whatever papers you need to in order to make the brass think she's safe. I will fudge nothing, I respond testily, because this incorrigible baboon of a woman seems to have forgotten that we are in public, but you will be happy to know that Lark is genuinely stable, mentally speaking. And I suppose you'd know, a lady and human? Goldra guffaws insipidly, with all the self-satisfied humor of someone who brought a painted rope to a snake exhibition. I laugh along with her dig at my sanity as if it were an old inside joke while the two of us file into the legislative hall. I'm used to it. If I hit a pebble for every time I heard an offhanded comment implying that I have metaphorically lost my marbles, I could fill the hole in the city by stacking them all the way up from the miss. Most people, after all, are far too stupid to comprehend any perspective other than their own. They don't want brilliant golden eyes, they don't want fangs, they don't want to be anything other than the unassuming little creatures they already are, and so they run the idea that I wish for more through their minds and end up unable to draw any conclusion other than insanity. Some days, it is difficult to continue believing in the value of leading them to greater things. Yet continue I do, and their insipid whispers always seem to quiet when I yield results. The legislative hall is as drab and boring as the name implies, and the smattering of still living true nobles within are not much more interesting. While a few other remarkable individuals have been inducted into our ranks since the perception event slew most of the upper class, the majority of the nobility are survivors of that disaster, and the majority of the survivors, surprise, surprise, are either closely allied to the church or straight-up members of it. Oh certainly, the Templars were all out of the city defending us from Drothizo, and Lord Tefton was all the way in one of the port cities visiting his grandson, and so on down the line. Does everyone have the perfect excuse to have not been around? Lady Etna is just about the only noble from before the perception event that I actually respect, and she only managed to survive because she moved to New Talsey to install a teleportation system for salt. Soon enough, the king enters with much ceremony, along with his escort of Templars. Having 2 years of experience reading speeches written by other people has, I must begrudgingly admit, improved his skill in doing so. The child is now a rank expert at having other people shove words down his throat while sticking their nose up his ass, and I can only assume that he's quite pleased with himself because of it. I pay a modicum of attention to what he's saying out of respect to the infinitesimal chance that any of it matters, but I turn the majority of my attention within. Being stuck sitting in a chair for hours on end is an ideal time to make modifications to my body. After all, it would be quite rude to start wiggling my fingers under the table, of course, but I solved this problem over a year ago. Instead of moving my hands, I flexed the many tongue-like prehensile spellcasting muscles I designed and grew in place of my rather useless reproductive system. I kept everything necessary for the fun parts of sex, but the rest was just wasting space. I figure if I ever go batshit insane enough to want to grow a child in my belly, I can always just put the womb back. Precise, complex movement is required to perform somatic spellcasting, but there's certainly no reason the movement has to come from fingers. These custom-made internal organs offer countless benefits, from obvious things like immunity to having my hands bound to more complicated advantages such as the capacity to cast more than 2 spells at once, to fool skilled casters about what spell I'm actually casting, and to rapidly increase the speed of casting any spell complicated enough to benefit from using my fingers and new organs in tandem. I am the only person in the world that knows I am capable of performing these feats, and I intend to keep it that way for as long as possible. This is why I repurposed the metal of my necklace into a ward against monocyte and anchored it inside my body. Anyone looking at me with metamancy will see that I am channeling, but they will be unable to see any of the spell configurations I craft within my own body. They will therefore assume I am simply channeling as a training exercise, because much like Gildra I have taken to doing precisely that during the entirety of my waking hours. All mishaps I've suffered due to this dangerous practice have, so far, been recoverable, and the improvement has been measurable. I therefore have no intentions to stop. As much as I have made my dedication to superior physical form obvious on the outside, any biomancer checking my internal organs will see far more. I have multiple redundant hearts, livers, and kidneys to prevent any wounds from killing me too quickly to heal. I have drastically increased skeletal density and muscular capacity, completely restructured joint designs that enable free range of movement for nearly any part of my body, an inviolable immune system, a near instantaneous capacity to clot wounds, and the ability to slowly regenerate any body part without needing to cast a spell to accomplish it, up to and including my brain. Today I am continuing my month-long development of an organ to convert magical energy into chemical energy. This will, regrettably, not remove my need to eat, but it will function almost identically to Bentley's talent and largely remove my need to eat for energy. Magic can reinvigorate me, just not replace the physical matter that my body is composed of. All of the theory and testing is complete. I merely need to finish the actual process of growing the organ, which requires careful supervision. The next 3 hours of my life are therefore not wasted, but I am still thankful when the meeting comes to an end. The budget that was ultimately decided on is laughably insufficient, but I have a monopoly on mold-proofing wood, so I can just quietly bump it up to sane levels using my personal wealth. Obviously, I give no indication that I have any intention or ability to throw money around like this, and publicly pretend that I rely on government funding for my work. I swiftly exit before I can be trapped by a chatty High Templar, returning to my laboratory as soon as I'm able. I'm gaining the reputation of somewhat of a recluse recently, as I rarely leave my work except for government meetings and the pro bono biomancy work I still perform once a 10-day. It's a reputation that suits me just fine, however, and I happily live up to it as I descend into the bowels of my workshop. I am, to put it bluntly, the best biomancer in Vaka by several orders of magnitude. Everyone knows this. As such, nearly every biomancy-related problem in the country at some point passes over my desk, and all of the actually important ones are seen to by me personally. I have over 24 biomancers under my direct employ within this facility, as well as a handful of professional servants and a collection of skilled slave laborers. All of them restrict themselves to the ground and upper floor, because it is the basement levels in which I perform disease work. It is restricted by virtue of sheer practicality. Anyone entering the lower levels without my direct oversight will quite unavoidably find themselves a test subject, and therefore locked in with the serial killers, rapists, and other unforgivables already sentenced to serve their punishment by my capable hands. The boon of human experimentation greatly accelerates my capacity to innovate and improve, and using death row convicts means I get all the fun without any of that pesky moral degeneracy. I can, after all, read the souls of my victims to double-check that the courts have done their due diligence. Justice is so much easier with conomancy involved. Personally, I think the best part of having a top-secret biological weapons development lab is that I can quite legally install the kind of protective enchantments that would be considered excessively paranoid within the king's own bedchambers after 2 weeks of daily assassination attempts. No matter what I cast in here, no matter what I do in here, not a whiff of it will reach the outside world, with the obvious exception of regular government and church investigation and oversight. Which is why, of course, I merely walked down here to disguise the mana signature of teleporting into my actual secret lab. There's no teleportation enchantment on my property. I'm not stupid enough to leave something like that where anyone could get it. Instead I have to cast the entire spatial spell by hand, an internal organ, which is not an easy task. Spatial magic is absurdly complicated, requiring such large and intricate magic configurations that the average mage would kill themselves by attempting even the most basic spell. I am no average mage, and I have access to the reverse-engineered version of capital self-translocation. While she can pop around like the maniac she is, I don't have the luxury of merely funneling mana through pre-constructed soul pathways. It takes me over 6 minutes of continuous casting to complete the massive spell configuration, and another 3 to triple check it for errors that could potentially end my life. I let the spell complete, and appear at home. Not the building I purchased for use as a home, but my actual home, an underground complex accessible only by teleportation or swimming through about a mile of underground lake. Rustic and rugged, decorated only by pale, vine-like chemosynthetic organisms, my multi-leveled sanctuary is exactly how I like it and exactly how I left it. Carved from natural cave formations, each room is a unique and pleasing beauty, far superior to any man-made artistic construction. But the real reasons I consider this a superior home are more personal in nature. "Welcome home, Lady Vesuvius," a familiar voice greets me warmly. Walking into the room to greet me is a young woman with pale skin, thin frame, raven black hair and eyes like solid blue sapphires split with black from top to bottom. Crafted to look exactly like Vita as I made her 2 years ago, my personal maid smiles at me in a way I know the real Vita never would have. A bubbling pit of revulsion pools up inside of me at the sight of her, but I push it down. A pet project I made out of a mixture of grief and boredom, the sheer wrongness of her is both a reminder and a promise to retrieve the genuine article. By the raw scale and breadth of the biomancy and conomancy I have subjected this person to, I doubt any living person would guess that this was once the man responsible for the lapse in security which ended in the death of Vita's sister. She is wearing an outfit that only very technically qualifies as underwear, because the degree to which I currently have her set to be enamored with me is a bit too high. "Hello, Nugas," I greet her back, allowing her to walk behind me as I quickly step past her. "Anything of note happen while I was away?" Margaret has been adapting poorly to her new form and cracked her soul falling down the stairs, Nugas reports. She suspects she will need your assistance repairing it. "Is she in any immediate danger?" I ask, frowning. "None. Just minor damage." "Anything else, then?" "Yes. Sky is here to see you. He has been waiting for a few hours." "Oh. Just Sky." "Yes, ma'am. Capita was not with him. He arrived the long way, and flew in sopping wet. About fucking time. Watch his eyes, Templars are so incompetent when I actually need them." I briskly alter course to the guest lounge, immediately spotting Sky, who has, indeed, seemed to have brought enough water with him to damage all of the furniture despite being fully capable of drying himself telekinetically, the absolute fuck. I must admit, the young man is some of my finest work, completely different from his previous self except in soul. Tall and broad-shouldered, his custom-designed skeletal structure and angular face portray the roguish attractiveness best suited to a man with the kind of non-musculature that forms on a person for whom the concept of exercise is fundamentally obsolete. He lifts off the couch the moment I enter the room, dashing towards me like a ravenous honeybee, quite certain that flowers are 5 feet tall and possess 4 limbs. "Where the fuck have you been?" he demands, a full-bodied panic filling his every word. "Sky, you layabout, did you know that it is actually quite normal for a person to not spend 100% of their time in their house?" I taunt him anyway, ignoring his distress. "They got Capita," he hisses. I know this already, as that's the only reason he would ever arrive without her. I raise my eyebrows in surprise anyway. "Who did?" I ask, already knowing the answer. "Where is she?" I press, knowing he'd already be there if he knew the answer. Conversations would be much easier if everyone would just politely agree to skip to the parts that matter, but culture demands the exchange of pointless drivel, and I am too well trained to not supply it. The fucking Templars. They must have ambushed her while she was separate. When half of her didn't come back, we went out looking for her, but I fucked up and let her out of my sight, and now I don't know where they took her. You have to find her, Vesuvius." "I will, I promise honestly. I didn't go through all the effort of helping the Templars plan a way to capture her just so I could leave her to rot. It took me over a fucking year to confirm that the Inquisitors run a top-secret prison in the forest without raising any red flags, and Lynn finally finished tracking the scent I forced then soon-to-be Inquisitor Jelisaveta's body to start producing, which she could track because I gave her Inquisitor Jelisaveta's sense of smell. Then the only damn problem became getting enough firepower to actually break into the place and make it back out. Netta, Mateo, and Lynn were obvious picks, but I needed someone with the raw brute force necessary to clear a way in and out. I needed Sky, and there was not a singular chance that I was going to get him. Sky, Capita, and I actually have built quite the friendly relationship in the years after the Perception event. Sure, he murdered my entire family, and while I miss no opportunity to goad him about that fact, if I'm being honest, it's a point in his favor. Audacity is attractive, and so are the people I use biomancy to make very attractive. Long story short, on a few occasions I've had the opportunity to test the equipment I gave him, with Capita's blessing, and on one memorable night, her assistance. I don't love the man, far from it, even, because he is an annoying, selfish piece of shit, but our relationship is friendly even if we are not friends. Despite this, I knew he would reject any plan to rescue Vita. Sky nurses a burning grudge for having actually lost a fight for the first time in his life, and while Capita would be sympathetic, she would ultimately choose Sky's safety over Vita's freedom. The process of freeing Vita would certainly be dangerous, but even more so she herself is the danger. I rather doubt the years have made my Vita any more positively inclined to Sky than he to her, and she is in every way the rock to his scissors. Sky has the kind of absurd power that could let him go toe-to-toe with a High Templar, and possibly even win depending on which one he faces, but Sky is at his weakest when tossing projectiles from a distance. At point-blank range, he can rip a person apart from the inside faster than a blink, yet his inability to get close to Vita without dying fundamentally unnerves a man that is used to being invincible. But there's one thing that can invariably move him to act. I don't want to understand whatever part of Capita's insane mind makes her love Sky, but for all his many faults he truly does love her in return. And as an animancer, well, there's only one place they could have sent her. You'd fucking better, Sky growls. Get your bloodhound on her yesterday, Vesuvius, or I swear I'll save your yammering. Sky, I told you I will, I snap at him. On one condition. When you go to break her out, if Vita is there. Fine, yes, he concedes immediately. Ha! Too easy. Wonderful. I will send Lynn out first thing tomorrow. You will send her out now, Sky demands. I tilt my head ever so slightly, passing my tongue absent-mindedly over the inside of my lips as I decide how to deal with that. Sky, I say evenly. Because I understand what you're going through right now. I won't shove you in a bathtub and make you fill it with your own pus for trying to give orders in my own fucking house. But let me be very clear, you will not dictate to me the proper method of retrieving a loved one from the Templars. You are an insipid, petulant brat that knows nothing about the subject, and you will do exactly as I say if you want to have any hope of returning with her alive. Oh yeah, because you're so damn good at getting people back from the Templars, he sneers. I do not give him the satisfaction of flinching at that. Some plans just take longer than others, and that's nothing to be ashamed of. I doubt Vita has had a pleasant 2 years, but she's strong. She'll be fine, and she'll understand the importance of optimizing success chances. You're the one crawling to me, I counter. Feel free to be thankful that you get to reap the benefits of my preparation. I will send Lynn tomorrow, because I am under observation, and rushing off to give her orders mere hours after Capita goes missing will make it a lot harder to get her back than just waiting a little while. I visit Vita's family every morning. That is when I will tell her, and we will move to retrieve Capita when Lynn finds where they took her. Again, I already know where they have to be taking her, but I need a few days to prepare for the assault anyway, and Sky doesn't need to know the details for that. He lets out an irritated huff and floats away, which is about as close as he gets to conceding an argument. Finally, the fucking pieces are in play. I'm coming for you, Vita. It won't be long now. Chapter 114. Yo, Jalisa. Wake up. My mind sputters and screams as I'm jolted awake by yelling voices and pounding on my door, the cacophony mixing with a brutal assault of sights, smells, feelings and sensations. I'm vaguely aware of the stiff immobility of my body, seized up and ignoring the quiet remains of rationality in my mind, trying to keep together the rapidly shattering structure of my sanity, rebuilding it in the midst of a hurricane. Chilled sweat clings to my skin as I feel every microscopic divot and contour of the mattress below my back. No blanket covers me, the uniform chill of the air far less distracting than the feel of cotton on flesh. The stench of mold in my own body mixes with the subtle undertones of stone, tiny cracks leaking out the scent of dirt and worms and ant pheromones. Each one crawls up my nose, fighting for my attention as I beg them to leave me alone. Even with eyelids firmly shut, the subtle differences in the light pressing itself through them pours into my head and refuses to go unanalyzed, demanding that I see through the skin of my own face. And worst of all, that fucking pounding on my door, punctuated by Vicky's insistent words that my brain can barely register, all echoing around the room and attacking me from different angles, highlighting the sound of my every breath and heartbeat, jolting my head with each smack of her fist, each impatient shift of her weight. I am, for a dozen horrifying seconds, not Templar Jalisa Veta but instead a disembodied assault of qualia, drowning my sense of self in agony. Filter, filter, filter. My mind screams as I swim through the storm, gathering my focus and reassembling my mind. Filter, filter, filter. These things do not need to be acknowledged. I can let them flow through me without acknowledgement. Filter, filter, Jalisa. We have a prisoner transport today. I know I fucking know. Shut up for 5 seconds. Hearing my own name is like a battering ram against my focus, forcing itself through the walls I've been so desperately crafting. But slowly, agonizingly, I rebuild myself and manage to respond. I'm getting up, I call back to my partner, voice strained. Please don't make any noise for a second. Oh, fuck, sorry, she whispers, which is the opposite of not making noise, but at least she whispered. Altogether, the time between my rude awakening and the moment when I'm finally enough of a person again to stand up and start my day is barely 30 seconds, but I swear to the watcher it always feels like hours. This one was worse than usual, as for once I was actually pretty deep in sleep when I got jolted out of it. I have not been sleeping well at all, and it will probably be months before I really get used to my room here enough to change that. And that's assuming I don't get subjected to whatever the fuck decontamination is again. A minute later I have my armor on and I'm walking out the door to my room, an embarrassed Victoria waiting for me. Sorry, she mumbles again. I forgot. It's fine, I sigh. I'm used to it. But seriously, just whisper my name once and I'll be up. I almost feel bad for lying. It's not really fine. I absolutely hate waking up like that and it tends to color my entire day, but it's true that I'm used to it, and Victoria has enough shit to deal with to be overly worried about my problems. She's obviously under a lot of stress, from the tight muscles twisting under her skin as she moves to the fatty aroma of her sweat. She's also obviously still pregnant, meaning she has been for nearly 2 months now. I want to talk to her about it, see if there's anything I can do to help out, but it's kind of an awkward subject to breach. Naturally, she has no obvious visual signs of pregnancy this early into it, so I really don't want her to ask how I know she's kept the child. Oh, well, I just noticed that milky, babyish scent is still permeating your vaginal discharge. Why yes, I do smell that kind of thing constantly from everyone around me, thank you for asking. It's not the most awkward way I've ever lost a friend, but it would be up there. Ugh, I wish I was talentless. Still, I eventually figure out a way to delicately breach the subject. You want to talk about that thing with Vita at all? I comment as the two of us head upstairs. She shrugs, a fresh layer of stress sweat leaking out of her armpits. She's actually kind of lucky in that her stench isn't too bad by stress sweat standards. It won't stand out to anyone else. She stayed quiescent the whole time you were in decontamination. It was no big deal. We both know that's not what I was referring to, but I get the hint that I shouldn't press. Well, that's good, I acknowledge. Quiescent, huh? That's a fun word. Really flows off the tongue. Vicky snorts with amusement, the mucus in her nose sounding like it's left over from a nasty run-in with either allergies or crying. Probably the latter. You caught me red-handed, she admits. I just like to say it. We both chuckle at that, and I take the win. She'll talk if and when she's ready, and I will be here if she needs me. Because I'm not allowed to leave. We reach the top floor of the facility, taunting me by dint of proximity to the surface. I'd really like to see the Mistwatcher's golden sky again, but that's not in the cards today. We're just accepting the 2 new prisoners and escorting them to their rooms. The top floor of Site 4 is an enormous trap designed to kill everyone in it. A magic-powered elevator is the only way to or from the surface, with both the elevator itself and the pathway to it watched at all times, devoid of cover and lined with bolt holes from which spells and arrows can blast through to annihilate anyone stupid enough to walk through without permission. I can hear and feel the various deadly implements aimed at me from all around the room, because you never take allegiance for granted in a prison full of animancers. Forget the emotional abuse and pregnancy and all that shit. It's a wonder that any of the inquisitors here aren't completely stressed out of their fucking minds. I don't know how Captain Manus holds himself together. The glass elevator descends, and inside it 2 Templars flanking the collared form of a twitching young woman come into view. Her mostly pink hair is obviously dyed, roots of reddish-brown hair showing where it has started to grow out. Her olive skin tone is marred with splashes of pink across one cheek. Her arms and fingers are tied behind her back, and in general she looks utterly miserable, her shaking lower lip joining her involuntary convulsions as if she is about to burst into tears at any moment. Her soul is jagged and broken, stitched back together in a style that I have come to recognize as a relatively early Ars victim. Based on her age she must have been experimented on as a child, probably no more than 3 or 4 years old, then stuck under the thumb of a monster for many years after. So, this is Capita, our new Delta-class prisoner. The combination of conomancy, offensive chaos magic, and motherfucking teleportation means she is absolutely zero-tolerance collar on at all times. And according to the reports, this isn't all of her. Her words. The elevator heads back up and returns back down, and it's easy to see why the second prisoner now on it also only answers to Capita. She's nearly identical to the first woman, in both body and soul. What I once assumed was a haphazard splash of paint on her face is apparently quite carefully applied, as even that matches the other Capita perfectly. When she spots her twin she immediately starts to struggle, mewling like an abused cat behind her gag as she tries to step through the glass door and touch her matching experiment. The Templars flanking her yank her back. Oh boy, this is going to be another problem case. Careful, one of the Templars grunts at us as they approach to hand the Copetus off. They are not very strong, but they're feisty. The twins stare at each other, and I can see thin, purple strands reach out from the cracks in the middle of their soles to try and touch each other. The colors give each of them a warning zap, and the threads dissolve as they convulse in response. Is that why they are so similar? Do they use conomancy to remove their differences? They look so unwell. Is that because of the conomancy, or because they can't use it anymore? I can see that, I say, nodding at the Templar. Thanks. We'll take them from here. Capita, will you walk with us? I carefully position my gaze between the 2 of them, trying to make it ambiguous which one I'm speaking to. As I'd hoped, it seems to relax them a little. They glance between me and each other, then nod helplessly, allowing themselves to be transferred to Vicky and I without protest. They walk in front of us, letting themselves be guided down the stairs. So, I say casually, starting to remove the gag of my Capita the moment we get to the stairwell. Welcome to Site 4. I know that you 2 are probably less than stoked to be here, but I promise things aren't as bad as you may be afraid of. No, Capita growls as soon as she's able. Wrong. Do not tear this sketch in half. Huh? I ask. She doesn't want to be called you 2, Vicky clarifies, to my surprise. She's saying that both Copetus are the same person with 2 bodies. Is that right, Capita? Capita seems surprised, but she nods happily. Yes. Yes. Please, cease separating me from myself. How did you get all that? I asked Vicky. One of Ultrix's selves calls herself a sketch, too, she explains, shrugging. Capita just kind of seems like a reverse Ultrix, you know? A brief moment of clarity seems to pass over Capita, both of them, both of her bodies, I guess, suddenly ceasing their constant twitching. Sister is alive? She mutters quietly. Oh, are you two related? Vicky asks happily. Yeah, Ultrix is a friend of mine. Work hard and try to get up to level 4 permissions, okay? Then I can set up some dates for you to visit. I suppress a shudder. Holy shit, what a thing to say to a person. Work hard and I will let you see a long-lost family member again? Please, Capita begs, before anything else, let me be myself. Once again, those thin purple threads from each body start snaking towards each other, questing slowly out of their respective souls. I assume that much like Vita's tentacles, the threads are free to move as the collar won't trigger until it senses any mana pushing through them, but once it does. Capita, I need you to stop that, Vicky says firmly. Please, Capita begs. Please. Sorry, I say, feeling like someone ought to. You understand why we can't let you cast, don't you? I know, Capita agrees desperately. I know. Please. I won't run or hurt you. Please. I glance at Vicky, who shrugs subtly in my direction. Unfortunately, Capita won't even be allowed in the same cell as her other half. There's not much either of us can do about that. I can only be broken for so long before the shards no longer fit, Capita pleads helplessly. I sigh. Damn it. Maybe I can recommend a fast track up the ranks? I say to Vicky. And if we get a good enough metamancer we should be able to block off teleportation without too much trouble. No way, Jalisa, Vicky protests immediately. If you try to fast track a Conomancer right after she shows up your ass is going into Decontum for a week. I mean, if it helps, fuck no. Don't you drop all your work on me, Vicky grumbles. I'll end up screwing over all your progress with the Epsilon. Oh, she's probably frustrated that I got authorization to promote Vita up to Epsilon 2 today. I didn't think about that, but I guess it's understandable. I haven't 100% decided if I'm going to do it, but I figure it will be pretty difficult for her to hug that stuffed animal we got on the shipment today if she can't use her arms. Still, I can't look at Capita's 2 faces and 2 broken souls and not feel sorry for her. Poor fucking girl. I can't believe an actual human person made other people into things like this. It just doesn't make any sense in my mind. Why? Why would anyone do this, let alone a High Inquisitor? I suppose some of the rumors say he never truly was one. They say that in the middle of the Ars Crisis, people started noticing inconsistencies in the records, places where he seemed to have slipped into history as if from nowhere. The Inquisition, after all, wasn't a publicly known branch of the Templars at the time. A very limited number of people were privy to the identity of the High Inquisitor, and rumor says that gave Ars exactly the opening he needed to make the whole world believe it was just something he always was. No evidence exists to prove it, but who knows what the real truth is when dealing with a man capable of twisting memories and allegiances as casually as a chef would stir a pot. Again, so they say. I was, 12 at the time? 13? My only real memory of the Ars Crisis is the constant fear, waking up in the night to the sounds of battle as his twisted splices fought Templars to death in the streets. The paranoia that any living thing could be one of his agents, or maybe even Ars himself. Your neighbor, your grocer, your dog. There was always that subtle terror of uncertainty that anyone you know and love could be pulled away and warped into a monster without any outward sign of it. That is what people remember when they hear the name Inquisitor. I don't blame a single other Templar for hating me now that I'm one of them. But sometimes we just have to take a hit to do the right thing. No matter how hard we get knocked down, a Templar stands up again. And despite everything, despite my disgrace, that's still what I am. An Inquisitor was needed, so I answered the call. Despite her protests, we lock each capita into a different cell. I promise to return and check on them soon, my mind already spinning with ways to try and help their situation. Maybe it will help if I ferry messages back and forth. I don't know. I'll think of something. I have to. In the meantime, the rest of our day still needs doing. My thoughts a messy jumble. I decide to start my rounds visiting a Gamma 5 prisoner by the name of Jeremiah. He's a learned necromancer who likely knows a bit of conomancy, though it's never been confirmed. Obviously, he hasn't practiced any animancy since being imprisoned just under a decade and a half ago. Most animancers in the prison were caught in the wake of the Ars crisis, when the lookout for them was at its all-time high. All gathered evidence and Jeremiah's own insistence indicates that he was never involved with Ars, but he's the closest I've got, so I still feel the need to ask him a few questions. I knock on his door and wait for him to call me inside, unlocking the room and stepping in. The 40-something-year-old man grins brightly as I walk in, standing up from a rocking chair and snapping the book he was reading shut with one hand. He's a thin, academic-looking man with the occasional flick of gray in his otherwise black short-cropped hair and mustache. His room smells like spices and paper, clean and refined and only slightly disorienting. Ah, Jelisaveta, a pleasant surprise. I wasn't expecting you until this afternoon. Sincerest apologies, I'll put on a pot of tea immediately. You know I'm not actually allowed to drink anything you brew, I answer, grinning under my helmet. He winks at me. That's no reason to be barbaric, he protests, smiling wider. A gentleman should always offer. At level 5 permissions, Jeremiah has access to a pretty nice if somewhat cramped apartment room, fully furnished with a modest kitchenette and private bathroom. He has often joked that the only reason he is not level 6 is that he'd have to leave his room if they released him back to society, though when pressed he'll admit the real reason. As a moderately skilled animancer, he would need to either consent to having the knowledge removed from his mind or apply to join the Inquisition himself, and he doesn't consider either to be a palatable option. So what brings you here this early? I quite enjoyed our last philosophical scuffle. You're a sharper wit than that last fellow, and, if I may be permitted to say so, much easier on the eyes. You've never once seen me with my helmet off, Jeremiah, I remind him, chuckling at the compliment anyway. He's such a goof, it's hard to imagine him as a dangerous animancer now. At least, it is until I glance at his collar. He does indeed make himself a cup of tea, as usual offering me one which I'm always required to decline. Of course, drinking isn't actually why he brewed it. His politeness is more than just an amusing joke. Most kinds of tea are agonizingly putrid, strong-smelling in all the wrong ways. But Jeremiah pressed me over and over about my favorite kind of tea until I finally gave in and told him about one that I can actually stand the stink of. Now he makes it every time I walk into his cell, and I couldn't be more thankful for it. I sit down in one of the other chairs as he returns to his favorite seat, sipping the warm brew mildly. So, in all seriousness, how can I help you today, Inquisitor? He asks. No Inquisitor stuff. Thankfully, I reassure him. At least none beyond the usual. I just wanted to ask. Why did you want to learn animancy? He hums, enjoying another sip. That's the kind of question I will have to tattle to your peers if they come asking. I shrug. Yeah, there are a lot of questions like that. Which is a shame, but I get the necessity for it. Still, I want to understand. He nods, considering his answer for a moment. Well, firstly I think it's important to understand that back in my day there was no Ars here, yes? He says. Animancy was still illegal, of course, but a different sort of illegal. You could joke about animancy 30 years ago without anyone looking at you like you suddenly grew a second head, because the cruel and wretched reality of that kind of magic was not so raw in anyone's mind. There had been no one like Ars in the history of Vaca. No context for exactly why it was as wretched a sin as it is considered today. But it was still a sin, I point out. A serious one. Well, I suppose this is the part that always blows the minds of the deeply religious, he answers, smirking playfully. Some of us think that you are wrong. Some of us believe that what you call sin is pointless oppression, baseless ramblings from old fools too caught up in their own traditions to look at the world with fresh eyes. And we are not mindless fools for doing so. There are good reasons that animancy is illegal, I insist. There are good reasons it shouldn't be, as well, he says, holding up a hand to stop me from protesting. I no longer believe what I did 25 years ago. The benefits are not worth the risks. That doesn't mean the benefits don't exist. As a young man I imagined skeletal horses in the streets, ferrying the public wherever they wish to go. I imagined undead laborers tilling the fields, replacing the repugnancy of slavery that infects the country with mindless, humane automatons. I imagined an army of rotting monsters pushing back the edges of the forest, fighting the oppression of Verdantop without loss of human life. To me, they were dreams worth pursuing. And so when I stumbled upon an old tome that survived the purges and gathered myself some like-minded friends to learn that which we were banned from knowing, we did it with the burning fire of righteousness in our hearts. I frown, thinking about that. I couldn't see it, I suppose. I don't know very much about necromancy, but it's my understanding that any soul will do, not just the souls of people. The problem is that learning to control dead animals gives you everything you need to know about controlling dead humans. It does sound like a wonderful dream, I admit. I wish there was a safe way to do it. His smile turns sad, and he nods at me. Exactly, he agrees. We thought we were heroes. And that. Well, that is when everything started to go wrong. I'm sure you've heard the story before. Blah blah, greater good, blah blah power corrupts. It's no less true just because it's a cliché. It's so easy to justify evil in the heat of the moment, when it feels like you have no other option. The goal becomes such a perfect goodness in the mind's eye that it's blinding. You forget to ask yourself if the goal is worth what you've trampled along the way. He sips his tea some more, leaving me to chew on his words while I enjoy the scent. Power is kind of frightening, I eventually comment. I'm really glad I don't have very much. To my surprise, Jeremiah starts laughing, nearly choking on his tea. Quite an incongruous thing for a warden to say to her prisoner, isn't it? He asks, eyes twinkling with mirth. I chuckle a bit as well, embarrassed. Sorry, you're right. That was insensitive. My point was not to say it's insensitive, he corrects softly. My point was to say it's inaccurate. Be careful with that, Jelisaveta. If you fool yourself as to how much power you hold, you can do nothing but abuse it. I blink, feeling duly chided. But something about that feels off. I mean no offense, but if that's how you feel, I ask slowly, why do you remain here? You're powerful, aren't you? Shouldn't you use that power, or at least give it up? His smile grows especially wide, a subtle shift in his posture indicating to me that I've inadvertently touched on something important. Part of power is knowing who should be trusted with it, he answers coyly. The conversation shifts to less serious subject after that, but even as I leave his cell I find myself thinking on his last words. As an animancer, he can join the Inquisition or lose his ability to cast animancy. In the former case, his power works for the Templars. In the latter case, well, I suppose it's not unreasonable to think that if other Inquisitors can remove memories, they can probably keep them as well. Either way, his knowledge, whatever it is, ends up in Templar hands. And I suppose it makes sense that he doesn't particularly trust the organization that has kept him imprisoned all these years. But was he implying more than that? And if so, should I be looking into it? The only people that can really check the Inquisitors are other Inquisitors. It is part of my job to internally police the organization, but if the corruption is within sight for, I wouldn't be able to tell anyone about it because I can't contact anyone outside sight for. So what would be the point of looking? Okay, that's actually the exact line of thought that would enable corruption, isn't it? Now I've got myself worried. It's the worst possible time for doubts, too, since I'm about to check up on Vita for the first time today. I sigh in annoyance the moment I step through the second set of security doors, the familiar yet still overwhelming scent of piss and shit attacking my face immediately. "Watch her, damn it, Vita, you said you didn't have to go last night," I grumble, setting down the soup I brought in the corner of the room so it's nowhere near her while I wipe her ass. I kneel down and shake her a little, snapping my fingers in front of her face and so lie. Naturally, she doesn't respond, so I remove the bindings over her mouth. She likes to talk and or eat when she wakes up, and I doubt anyone likes waking up with a clamp over their jaw. That leaves me to the near futile practice of holding my breath as I loosen and pull down her trousers. Ugh, so disgusting. I use a wet cloth to wipe off the inside of her thigh and nearly shit my own damn self as a motherfucking eyeball opens underneath my fingers. Dick in a sock. I swear, leaping backwards. The thigh tracks me with inhuman precision as the rest of Vita seems to groggily wake up. The three eyes on her face blink slowly, each out of sync with one another as her soul blearily looks around for a few short moments before all of them zero in on me at once. "Oh," Vita mumbles. "Hey, Jalisa." That wasn't there before," I insist, pointing at her disturbingly placed optical organ as I try to get my breathing back under control. She glances down at her own thigh, quickly waking up and letting her features settle into a scowl. "Ugh," she growls. "No, it wasn't. I can't believe I'm growing more of these things." The eye twitches around in her leg as she practices moving it, sending an involuntary shudder of revulsion through my body. I approach anyway, still needing to finish cleaning her up. "So, you didn't grow that on purpose then?" I ask. "Fuck no," she snaps. "Why would I want an eyeball that just rubs up against my pants all day?" "So your body is just growing entire eyeballs on its own." "Well, you've got me collared," Vita dismisses. "It's not like I can cast spells on myself." With the supreme act of will I force myself not to react to that, but I know the effort is pointlessly wasted. It's Vita, obviously she's going to pick up on anything I feel. And maybe, I'm getting a false positive here. But for the first time since meeting her, I just got a clear impression that her words were a lie. Only after I finish my dirty cleaning work do I have the courage to look at her face. She's as blank as usual, giving no indication that she knows what I suspect. Still, I'm not sure what to do about it. Those terrifying words from her file ring through the back of my mind, demoted from Epsilon 3 to Epsilon 1 after a lethal altercation with staff. How did a magic-blocked little girl kill a trained Templar under Epsilon-level security? Obviously, I asked that question as soon as I got out of her cell the first time. I did not at all like the answer. "We don't know. You came here wanting to ask a different question," Vita reminds me. I blink, nodding in agreement as I finish fetching her a clean pair of pants. Then I grab the soup, quickly reheating it with thermomancy and spoon-feeding her to her clear delight. She's not wrong. I wanted to have one more conversation with her before I officially promote her to Epsilon 2. Although reminding me why she's in security level 1 in the first place is about the worst way to start that conversation. "Yeah," I confirm. "I want to talk to you about raising your permissions." She cackles, smiling like a mad dentist pulled her lips back for a tooth inspection. It makes her look far more in pain than it does happy, but all of her expressions are weird. She says she hasn't been emoting much over the years and it shows. The way she pulls her own face around without even using her muscles leads to all kinds of freakish, impossible expressions. I just have to accept that it's going to happen and pay attention to other cues on how she actually feels. "You just want me to be able to use my arms so that I can piss without your help," she accuses. I smirk a little, though my helmet blocks any vision of it. She'll pick up on my amusement regardless, of course. I would be lying if I did not admit that is part of my motivation, I tell her honestly. She cackles again. "I can actually stand you, you know? You don't try to hide shit, and I can actually get your sense of humor. So sure, why the fuck not? I need to practice moving again anyway. What do you need from me?" I let out a deep breath, setting the now empty soup bowl down beside me. "I need you to tell me why you killed the Inquisitor before me," I say. Her expression goes back to blankness. Not how I killed him? She asks. Better Templars than I have tried to extract that answer and failed. I shrug. So no. Just wise enough for me. I want to know what would drive you to murder a person. Her body stays still, but I watch her spiritual tendrils twist furiously at the memory. A lot of things, I guess, Vida mutters. I feel like it's no more than most people, though. When I kill, it's to protect me or my family from being killed by someone else. So you're saying he was going to kill you? I ask, a bit confused. As an Epsilon class, we are very explicitly not allowed to kill her, and the guards outside would have certainly stopped any attempt. No, she says, tapping a small soul inside her belly with a tendril. It's small and black, floating snugly right above her own soul's core along with a slimy, bubbly soul with small tendrils of its own and a soul of solid water. He found something that would work. He found a way to remove them. My eyes opened wide, drawing conclusions together. Now that makes sense. Hell, that's part of my job. But Vida believes that souls that go to the Mist Watcher are destroyed beyond repair. She, arrogantly, considers herself to be the only afterlife in the world. So she would believe a method to remove the souls inside her tantamount to a death threat against her family, friends, and hundreds of others. She's wrong. Horribly, tragically wrong. The poor girl is twisted and furious and confused, full of hate and bitterness. But she's not evil. She lashes out and hurts people because it's the only way she has to feel a semblance of control, because she has been abused and stepped on and only taught the lessons of strength versus strength. I have to believe that good will shine through if she's shown a little kindness and love. Okay then, I say, nodding. That's all I really needed to know. Then, to her surprise, I actually surprised her. I gently pull her away from the wall and start undoing the bindings that tie her arms behind her back. She'll still have to keep the finger restraints, but they won't be completely preventing movement. She should still be able to do most basic tasks with her hands. When I completely free her arms, I finally get to see that soul-filled snake that seemed to be running down her sleeve, a tentacle of pale flesh, growing out of her elbow. My breath catches. Eyeballs and tentacles. Seeing it in the physical, it's impossible to ignore the comparison. And she is not doing it on purpose? No, no. Well damn, I didn't think you would accept that answer, Vida mutters, breaking me from my thoughts. Time to enjoy learning to wipe my ass with mittens on, I guess. Yep, congratulations, I say, half joking but mostly honest. But that's not all. Oh. She blandly asks, shakily getting to her feet as she flexes her arms for the first time in almost 2 months. Yep, I confirm. I've got a surprise for you, but it'll have to wait until lunchtime. She huffs air from her nose, scowling slightly at her new, fleshy appendage as it writhes freely around. Well, consider me hungry, she says. I always do. The rest of the morning is rough, my shitty sleep and painful awakening tainting the long hours between dawn and the second meal of the day. But it's worth it, all of it is worth it for the moment I return. I re-enter Vida's cell with the plushie behind my back, unsure why the sender wanted it to reach her but hopeful that it will give her some comfort from home. She is still upright when I arrive, pacing around the room with an awkward gait, flinching as her sore muscles protest each and every movement. Jalisa, she grunts as greeting, still walking. I don't smell any food. Don't worry, I have food outside. I've got something else for you first, though. I reveal the stuffed bird from behind my back, holding it out to her carefully. Lazily, she glances my way, but as she sees what's in my hands her whole body halts, mouth hanging slightly open, paralyzed with surprise. Slowly, haltingly, as if it can't possibly be real, she stutters towards me, lifting the toy from my hands and staring at it with disbelief. Roscoe. She whispers. Ta-da. I cheer happily. Someone tried to send this to you over a year ago, but I finally got the request to ship it pushed through a little while ago. It just arrived on today's delivery. I'm not sure if Vida is even paying attention to me, however, her whole body shaking as she pulls the stuffed animal close to her chest and squeezes hard enough to flatten it, a startlingly normal smile ever so slightly starting to twitch on her lips. Then the shaking intensifies, her eyes water, and she starts to sob. The disturbing, inhuman monster is washed away by her tears, leaving only the vulnerable little girl underneath. A young woman, perhaps, barely 18 but still far too young to be expected to handle the challenges the Mist Watcher gave her. "He's yours," I promise her, squatting down alongside her as she collapses to her knees. "Not just when I'm here. He's squishy and safe and officially Epsilon Security approved." "You brought him back," she blubbers, sucking in great hiccuping gasps between every breath. "Thank you. Thank you." "You're welcome," I answer warmly, for once appreciating my ability to soak in her full-bodied joy with all of my senses. "You want some food?" She nods her head rapidly, too caught up in the throes of her tears to articulate and answer. I have the goofiest possible grin beaming under my helmet, but I suppose I'll be the only one to know about it. I turn and start walking out of the cell to go fetch her some lunch. Behind me, between her sobbing gasps of joy, she manages to whisper words with such gratitude, such honesty, that it chills me to my bones. I will never forget them, not in my waking hours or my nightmares. "You get to live," she promises me. Chapter 115. So then she claimed she killed Inquisitor Elliot because he discovered a working method to extract the souls from her body, and heavily implied she did so via spellcasting, despite the collar. I finished my verbal report to Warden Manus, a full 4 days after I penned and submitted a written report on exactly the same subject. His stern and withering glare is completely ineffective with my attention captured by the tapping and skittering at the back of his office cupboard. An oily, disturbingly sweet scent wafts around the room, filling me with the urge to vomit. "And you're confident in this information?" he presses. "As confident as I reasonably can be, sir," I confirm. "Which is quite good in your case," he mutters, and I'm a bit taken back by the unexpected compliment. If this is true, it's more information than we've gotten from the Epsilon since she got here. That said, while Inquisitor Elliot spent a lot of time trying to free those captured souls, he never once reported to me about a reliable method. Just theories, most of which failed and the rest of which were denied for violating Epsilon protocols. Which means they would have endangered Vida's life. Elliot sounds like such a charming fellow. I shouldn't think ill of the dead, though, and certainly not of someone I've never met. I will the thought away. There's also the question of how she could possibly cast with the collar on, I point out. Yes, he agrees. The collar enchantments are powerful in their simplicity. They detect mana entering a soul and give a warning zap for trace amounts, knocking the target unconscious for anything more than that. No mana in the soul, no casting. Could she be immune to the knockout effect? I wonder. Her file listed a lot of resistances to physical trauma. No, we tested that. She recovers faster than most, but she's not immune. Your manual collar activation should function just fine. I nod. There's an emergency rune on my armor which, when used, sends out a pulse of mana that activates every prisoner collar in a wide range, knocking them all unconscious. It works regardless of whether or not mana is being channeled by the prisoner, and is pretty much indiscriminate. If I were to hazard a hypothesis, perhaps something about the odd shape of her soul tricks the enchantment, Manus grunts. I don't know exactly how, but it's possible. I will get our metamancy team to look into it. I nod, not really having anything to add and admittedly still distracted by the wretched pattering sound of claws on wood, hard joints scraping and clicking with movement. In any case, excellent work, Inquisitor Gili Salvetta. More guards will be stationed on the Epsilon floor until we get to the bottom of this. Brush up on your non-lethal takedowns and double down on magic resistance training. Dismissed. Understood, sir. That awful, patter-scratch noise breaks my focus again, and I sigh. Sorry, sir, can't I actually see behind your cabinet for a second? My boss' confusion is obvious, but he nods in assent and lets me start dragging pieces of his office furniture away from the wall. Behind them skitters the quickly growing colony of cockroaches that I've been failing to ignore since I got here. A thought comes to mind before I start to kill them, an insidious thought that I think I'll regret but can't ignore. Actually, do you have like, a bucket or something, sir? With a lid? Surprisingly, he does, so I collect every last one of the damn roaches, pulling them in with a simple kineticism spell whenever they skitter out of my reach. Fuck, how long have those been there? Manus curses. Just a few days, sir, I answer. Must have tagged along with something you brought in from the shipment. Disgusting, he grunts. Well, so are humans, and also so is basically everything else, but I don't disagree. Cockroaches breed fast and like to group together, which means their smell gets particularly awful if you leave them alone. There's always going to be the sound and stench of bugs, though. It's wretched, but inescapable. Except in Vita's cell, now that I think about it. What the fuck are you doing with those? Manus grunts. Taking them somewhere they won't stink up the place when they die, I tell him. Frankly, sir, I'd like to request official permission to smack anybody that squishes a roach somewhere public. These things are wretched. He chuckles, and so with live insects squirming around in a bucket I excuse myself from my superior's office and make my way to the beta security floor. Technically, I'm not even lying. The disposal method I'm thinking of won't smell at all. I'm heading to a Beta 3 prisoner named Melissa, a young girl that could arguably place pretty high in a competition to decide the saddest and unluckiest history of our many unfortunate inmates. Melissa was the daughter of a successful potter who got paid a handsome sum by a noble that fancied his work to move to Skyhope. At the ripe age of 11, her whole family hitched a ride with the hunter-gatherer trade caravan. Pretty standard stuff, really. It's about the safest way to travel unless you're lucky enough to have a contingent of Templars going the same direction you are. Without warning, a surge of predators smashed into the caravan and a group of scavengers cleaned up the rest. With the exception of Melissa, they all got slaughtered, and against all odds she managed to drag herself all the way down the rest of the road and make it to Skyhope. Of course, the first time I heard that story I thought to myself, well, why the fuck is she in prison then? The poor thing? There are better places to go if you just need to learn how to control the kind of dangerous talent she must have had to survive that. She's obviously a victim, not a criminal. Melissa? It's Julie Salvetta. Is it all right if I come in? I ask, knocking on the door. Ah. See, come in. She warbles. I let myself inside, the door shutting, locking, and watertight ceiling behind me. My boots snap against the sticky ground, the sparse, humid room devoid of a bed or chairs at the prisoner's request. Instead it is a few dolls and other children's toys, carefully crafted from clay rather than wood or chitin. At the edge of the room a gelatinous glob of sky-colored liquid quickly reshapes itself into a humanoid form, trying and failing to put on wool-woven clothing without it sinking inside her form and dissolving into nothing. The corner of the room has piles of similar half-destroyed shirts and skirts, and Melissa whimpers as she inadvertently adds another to their ranks. Sorry. Sorry, I'm trying, I promise I'm trying, but I just, hey, it's okay. I reassure her, stopping and holding up my hands in a placating gesture. You don't have to dress up just for little ol' me. I should be able to. She whines. I know I can. It's just so hard. The golden ooze quivers with distress, finishing up the formation of fingers and the contours of a human girl's face. The trick behind her story is that it leaves out the part where the entirely talentless Melissa did not, arguably, survive the attack at all. By most definitions Melissa died, but was brought back to life when an animavorous oozoid failed to completely digest her soul. Depending on who you ask, Melissa either became an oozoid, or the oozoid just believes itself to be Melissa. My position is that it doesn't fucking matter, because she is a person named Melissa either way. Hey, I'm serious, don't worry about it. I insist. I'm not here to get you to practice anything. I got you a treat. A treat? She chirps, forgetting to maintain her legs and flowing quickly towards me. What kind of treat? A weird kind, I answer, grinning behind my helmet as she curiously blinks liquid facsimiles of eyelids over sightless, false eyes. Melissa tends to put people off with her not quite human shape, but I absolutely love it. She has no skin, no blood, no organs. Her body is just a memory of a shape imprinted on the soul of a child eaten by a monster. And I think she is fucking adorable, ecstatically so. Her form is nothing but homogeneous liquid, not even containing the disgusting zoo of microorganisms that I have to suffer through every time I take a drink of water. It feels almost like looking at someone from before I got my talent, and that just... holy shit. No disgusting pores vomiting minuscule beads of sweat, no spider web of capillaries pulsing under the skin, no fucking face bugs. She's a genuine joy to look at, unlike almost everything else in my life. That's suspicious, she accuses. You're being suspicious, Paris. My smile drops. I'm Julie Savetta, I remind her. Oh, she says, her form starting to lose shape for a second before snapping back. Oh, right. And there's the cloud blocking the rainbow. Melissa was eaten when she was only 11, according to her. She got moved to Site 4 as soon as she was discovered, and since then she has been here for 13 years. She's nearly my age, but she's shown almost no mental development over that time. Her memory has more holes than a net. She's played with the same toys, lived in the same room, and struggled with the exact same problems for 13 fucking years and has hardly even realized it. Every year we apparently throw her a birthday party, and every year she still believes she's 11. She's perpetually stuck at security level 3 despite how desperately and willingly she wants to help, because she can't learn. Even though her body seems capable of becoming impermeable, she can't hold herself that way long enough to not be a contact hazard to nearly every organic substance. And worst of all, sometimes she is just barely lucid enough to know it. So, anyway, the surprise. I rally, reaching into the bucket and pulling out a squirming little cockroach. Ta-da! W what? Melissa shrieks, slipping backwards. Julie Savetta. That's not funny. I can't believe you got me bugs. I grimace. You mentioned once that you kind of miss eating those forest bugs, didn't you? I remind her hesitantly. No. I mean, kind of. I just ate them because I had to. It's okay to like eating weird things, you know, I tell her. No, it's not, she mumbles, turning her head away from me. I'm not supposed to touch that kind of stuff. I take a deep breath, letting it out slowly to psych myself up. Yeah, I know she's not. Try it, please. I press, holding it out to her. Hesitantly but obediently, she reaches out and plucks the wiggling cockroach from my fingers, being careful not to touch my armor. I hate myself a little for it, knowing in advance that she genuinely doesn't want to but is so used to following orders from Inquisitor uniformed Templars that she'll do it anyway. But I have to know. Sure enough, the cockroach slips inside her gelatinous body and immediately starts to disintegrate. I keep my eyes carefully locked on its tiny soul, as well as the only marginally larger cracked black orb that is Melissa's own soul. It's a damaged, battered thing, like an ancient stone tablet breaking and fraying away. I watch as the bug's soul is pulled in towards her, dissolving into motes of dust which flow inside, ever so slightly working to repair that damage. Oh, Watcher, this is so good. Melissa announces. This is really good. I have to quickly set the bucket on the floor as suddenly Melissa flows half her body into it, absorbing all the rest of the captured insects at once. It all absorbs into her, and as I feared, her soul looks undeniably healthier. Fuck. Oh, that. Do you have any more? Melissa begs. Please tell me you have more. I genuinely have no idea if this counts as a sin. Does the Mistwatcher care about cockroach souls? I mean, it would be a pretty weird heaven if all the monsters the Mistwatcher has made to challenge us just show up and try to kill us all over again in the afterlife, so I believe only thinking creatures go there. I'd need to chat with a preacher to be sure. Either way, this is definitely against Melissa's containment policy. Of course, Melissa, I tell her anyway. I don't have any right now, but I can come back later with more if you keep this a secret, Okay? She shrinks down a little, squishing in on herself. That's easy, she mumbles. Can't tell anyone something I don't remember, right? Fuck, what awful words. Damn it. Well, at least it helps me feel less guilty about adding to my sin tally. I may not know if the Mistwatcher cares about cockroaches, but he has to care about Melissa. If this is the only way. Well, someday you will remember, I say, as much of a prayer as a promise, so when you do, keep it between us, okay? Okay, Paris. It hurts, but I don't have the heart to correct her again. Instead I quickly clean all of the leftover bits of her out of the bucket, unlock the cell, and exit. I take the long way to the cafeteria, my mind churning as I wolf down some breakfast and grab seconds to take to Vita, as is my routine. Victoria, and most of the people here, really, seem to really enjoy the food, the church having at least been kind enough to supply a skilled chef to a facility where the cafeteria is literally the only place to eat. Unless you eat cockroaches, I guess. Anyway, this translates to me absolutely despising the food, because what everyone else considers a delicious pinch of salt, I consider criminal assault. To my tongue, everything is almost painfully overseasoned. But like with most things, I'm used to it. That's pretty much the mantra of my life. When I open Vita's cell, I'm surprised to find her not only awake but doing push-ups. Her little stuffed crow is sitting on her back like an adorable training buddy. Shit, that's funny. I'm glad I could see this today. Hey, Jalisa, Vita grunts, a thin sheen of sweat coating her body. Hey, Vita, I greet back. Bread and stew day. Yup, she grins, collecting her stuffed animal with her elbow tentacle before hopping to her feet. Smells nostalgic. Oh? I ask, handing her the bowl and spoon. How so? She takes a deep breath, seeming to relish in the simple ability to feed herself even after having been doing it for half a 10-day. They pretty much always served stew at the Hunters Guild, she explains, rapidly wolfing down multiple bites without spilling a single drop or dropping a single crumb. The third eye in her face and the eye of her soul point my way as her two normal eyes focus on the meal. Oh yeah, you used to be a hunter, I comment. She snorts. Yeah, kinda hard to remember, isn't it? Since I've been a prisoner for so much longer. It's funny. When I first realized I could fucking rip souls out of things, I figured the best way I could use it was against monsters. Get stuck with a bad talent, use it to protect people anyway, you know? Lot of fucking good that did me. Getting to eat monster souls was nice, at least. And eating other souls made your soul stronger, right? I ask without really thinking about it. Vita stops eating for a moment to flash me a horrible, all-too-knowing grin. That it does. I have to say, as a former orphan, it really does the body and mind a lot of good to stop starving all the time. Nothing is shittier than having to live entirely off of the kindness of strangers, Jalisa. Strangers can be very kind, I protest. They can be cruel, too, she counters. Not everyone is lucky enough to run into someone that will actually help. How long was she starving before you showed up? Of course she saw all that somehow. Of course. How much do you know about Melissa? I ask her. Is that the kid's name? Vita grunts, using the bread to clean the inside of the stew bowl before eating it. Bits and pieces. She's kind of like me, but mostly not really. Her problem, I think, is that she doesn't have a brain. Mistwatcher soul shards are designed to work with brains. They hook right up to and intertwine with part of the noggin after being put in a body. The soul requires the brain to grow, and the soul has to grow in order for her to grow. Unless the soul grows, the soul can't contain more stuff, and if the soul can't contain more stuff it can't hold. Well, anything. Memories, skills, you name it. Take a soul out of the environment it's supposed to work in, and it just doesn't work as well. In fact, it usually degrades over time. Go figure. So she needs some other way to get a bigger soul. I blink in surprise. I think that might be the most words I've ever heard Vita say in one sitting before. You're saying it will work, I summarize. I guarantee it, Vida confirms damningly. Honestly, I could fix that girl in a heartbeat. And not in like, a creepy way or whatever, but actually fix her. I've done it before on a Vrothizo victim. Huh? I ask. Oh, didn't you know? Vida asks, smirking again. Vrothizo eat souls too. It's kind of weird how the Mistwatcher teaches that souls are sacred and yet lets so many animivores run around, don't you think? Shit. Is she goading me? She doesn't feel like she's lying. Can you imagine how many Templars must have died with damaged souls? Vida continues. Or hell, I bet there are a bunch of Vrothizo big enough to swallow someone whole. Not a single bit of soul undigested. No afterlife for them, I guess. There absolutely are Vrothizo big enough to swallow people whole. I knew people that were swallowed whole. No. Surely that just means lost or damaged souls can still reach the afterlife? I hedge. Then what the fuck is your problem with necromancy? Vida snaps. I stiffen a bit, startled at the outburst. Still. Is that a contradiction? Either soul damage affects a soul in the afterlife and the Mistwatcher allows that, or it doesn't, and that should extend to damage dealt by conomancy and necromancy. Right? Or is that a false dichotomy? Is there some fundamental difference between removing part of the soul and altering it with a spell? Well, I guess it's nice that you actually feel conflicted about this, Vida grunts. It's a good point, I tell her. The problem is that I hardly know anything about animancy. I'll have to talk to some people. Preachers, better inquisitors. And maybe some other animancers, I suppose. Setting the now clean bowl aside, she moves her stuffed animal from tentacle to lap, her face blank but in her eye twitching with thought. I should probably get going, I manage after a while. Other people to check up on. See you at lunch? I gather her bowl and silverware, turning to leave, but Vida speaks up unexpectedly. No, she protests quickly. Sorry. Could you stay for a bit? Surprised, I give her a slow nod, staying put. She seems a bit on edge, but after another moment of silence she speaks up. Do you think I deserve to be here, Jalisa? The question takes me by surprise. In all honesty, I don't know if I ever thought about it before. I probably should have, I guess, but it's not really my place to make those judgments, I answer lamely. She scoffs. No, you don't know enough to understand the question, do you? She grumbles. You've read about it, but you've never seen what this place is, not really. Subtle hints learned over many years quickly put me on edge. Her muscles tense, her body prepares sweat in anticipation of action. I feel, all of a sudden, like I am in grave danger. It's as if I'm in the forest again, surrounded by greater predators. Right now, as we speak, 4 of your coworkers are torturing Capita, Vida growls. My brain halts at that, unable to form a coherent response. What? I ask dumbly. You heard me, she says. She hasn't broken yet, but at this rate she will. In more ways than one. But why? Because she caused the Skyhope perception event, Vida answers frankly. They want her to spill accomplices, hideout locations. They haven't caught everyone involved. So she's screaming up there, with a biomancer on standby to fix her broken fucking fingers. Holy shit. How does she know any of this? But I mean, if there are still people involved in the perception event at large, I guess we do need to, you know what? She snaps, cutting off my thoughts. Sure. Fine. I'll grant you that's maybe not the worst reason. But I got fucking tortured too, and they did it to me because they wanted to kill my family. That's not, it is. She roars, jumping to her feet. This right here is, look at me. I jolt in terror, peeling my gaze off her face and down to her she's pointing, the core of her soul. In one tendril is a black, anemic soul, not unlike Melissa's. This is Angelian, Vida hisses. She is my sister. And I will never, ever, let you fucks take her. It doesn't matter how much you starve me or waterboard me or tear off my fingernails or break my bones. And they have done all those things and more. Fucking look at me and tell me I'm lying. She's not. She's really, actually not. All I fucking wanted was to feed my goddamn family, and this whole wretched island has been fighting me every single step of the way. All because of mindless cattle like you that worship the fucking farmer. You're not content just letting us starve. No, you have to choke us as soon as we find a bite to eat. Well, I'm done. I'm fucking done. It's over. I've waited 2 years for this chance, and you finally fucked up. You sent them right to me, and gave them the perfect excuse to bring the big guns. Oh, no. The horrible smile of this 5-foot-tall girl somehow makes me feel so small. This is more than just a tantrum. My hand hovers over my color activation rune, heart pounding as my senses sharpen in the face of death, pushing me to the brink. Do it, Jelly, Vida sneers. I'll show you what I showed him. Shit. I thought you said I get to live. I stall, desperately trying to think of a way to de-escalate. Oh, you do, Vida says with haunting sweetness. But only you. A vibration rocks through the facility, shaking from the first floor all the way down here to the bottom. An explosion? Doesn't matter. I don't hesitate, pouring mana into the color activation rune. I feel a pulse, a chill, a loud cracking noise. Then nothing. Vida takes a long, deep breath, drinking joyfully in my impotence. Release me, she orders. I don't do that, because why the fuck would I do that, but impossibly, it doesn't matter. Her bindings move onto their own power, lattices of soul energy snaking through them. Clasps undo themselves, bindings loosen, locks twist from the inside without a key. I try to activate the rune again but Vida's collar pops straight off, its enchantment broken. Everything we foolishly thought kept this girl locked up clatters to the ground. I rush forward, praying that by some miracle I can grab her and choke her out before dying, but I only run face first into her outstretched hand. An iron grip splinters the front of my helmet as a tendril growing from the elbow of the same arm wraps itself around my neck. I try to peel away her fingers, strike at the inside of her arm, twist her joints, do anything, but her tiny, twig-like limb may as well be the Watcher's own for all I can affect it. Jelly, I like you, I really do, she quips, still holding a fucking stuffed animal under one arm. But we are not at the stage where I will let you hug me. I scream as her grip tightens, jagged chunks of chitin stabbing into me as my face airplate shatters. There we go. I put all that work into remembering faces and you hardly ever show yours. Open. Dragging me to the door, I watch as Vida rips out a sliver of her own soul and shoves it in the locking mechanism, which then clicks ajar as commanded, pulled from the inside by a veritable skeleton key. Another locked door is immediately in front of her, and beyond it are 4 Templars waiting to attack and subdue her. They have no chance of winning. D-Done single quote T kill them. I shout at her, blood dripping into my mouth. Their names are Sarah, Howe, Kenneth, and John. Kenneth supports his ex-wife and daughter back in Skyhope. Howe watched and did nothing. Vida hisses, 4 tentacles piercing through the wall and returning with 4 familiar souls. No. This can't be happening. Use your fucking eyes, Jalisa. Vida presses, tossing me away as she shoves a soul fragment in the next door. Open. You are the only one who raised a hand to stop a beating here. What does that say about your organization? Another explosion rocks the upper floors as Vida's soul-holding tendrils reach up towards her wide-open mouth. Oh, Watcher, no. She's about to eat them. Stop. I beg. Please, Vida. You're better than this. Aren't you? She narrows 3 of her eyes at me, stepping over to her. I kneel helplessly on the ground and squatting in front of me. Only you, she promises again. As far as I'm concerned, if it's a good enough death for a cockroach, it's good enough for a Templar. She drops the souls down her throat and I watch in horror as the people I knew dissolve away into nothing. Tope continued. Thanks for listening.